The HOA president was standing on my dock at 7 in the morning with a clipboard like it was a badge, ordering me to tear it down in 48 hours, completely unaware that I legally owned every drop of water she was glaring at. Yeah, that happened. And if you can picture the look on her face when I told her to check the property lines, you'll understand why I still smile about it when I make coffee. It was a Tuesday mist lifting off Millbrook Lake like smoke after a rain cedar planks warm under my feet. And then click, 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 designer heels crossing my boards like a metronome for bad decisions. Eyesore, she said, waving papers that smelled like toner and cheap perfume non-compliant. Remove it or we'll lean your house. And I just stared at the water where my wife used to want to watch the sunrise and said softly, "Ma'am, you might want to read those deeds a little closer." Let me back up a sec. I'm Colin Mercer, 58, retired civil engineer. Bridges, flood control, the unsexy things that keep towns from washing away. And 3 years ago, cancer took my wife Lena after 32 years of marriage. That felt like 20 minutes in a lifetime at the same time. You know what I mean? We'd sketched this dock between chemo rounds, argued over left-handed versus right-handed bench placement like it mattered more than oxygen. And when she made me promise to build it, even if she wouldn't be here to stand on it, I said yes because I'm stubborn and because love can be a blueprint too. I moved to Millbrook Lake Estates thinking it was a quiet place to heal 47 homes around a 200-acre lake, friendly waves, retired teachers, and small business owners. The kind of neighborhood flyer that brags about community picnics and native plants. Then came Brianna Whitcomb. Picture a real estate headshot that learned to walk big house at the point. Highlights you could see from Space Smile that says, "Don't forget your wallet." Within 8 months, she'd charmed her way into the HOA presidency and announced waterfront structure standardization for optimal property values, which turned out to mean every dock should look like the plastic floating platform sold by Whitcomb Construction, owned by her husband Ron, 3 times the price, half the craftsmanship, none of the soul. When I showed my county permit stamped 6 ways from Sunday, she peered at them like they were written in crayon and said, "Permits don't supersede community standards." Mr. Mercer and handed me a violation $500 a day until demolition emergency community protection powers, as if my hand-shaped cedar was a biohazard. That night I sat on my supposedly illegal dock, listening to water slap the posts like polite applause, and I could hear Lena in my head the way engineers hear rebar singing, "When bullies pick on engineers, they regret it." In the morning, I took my coffee to the county records office because if 30 years taught me anything, it's argue later, check the plans first. Dora Alvarez was at the counter, silver hair eyes like she'd seen every boundary fight since Reagan, and when I explained Brianna's ultimatum, her smile tilted like Christmas for bureaucrats. "Riparian rights," she whispered, sliding a magnifier across my deed. "Haven't seen this in a while." Riparian rights for the uninitiated are the Wild West of property law. Basically, some old deeds don't just give you dirt to the water's edge, they give you legal use of the water itself, up to the high water mark docks, boats, swimming, the whole aquatic buffet. "Mind if I dig deeper?" Dora asked. And 20 minutes later, she came back carrying history, like treasure-stamped agreements from 1923, maps browned at the edges, a name I half remembered from family reunions, Theodore Mercer, my great-uncle, a flood control engineer who'd convinced the county to let him dam Millbrook Creek to stop spring floods and, oh, by the way, create a recreation lake. He kept perpetual water management authority in the deal. Perpetual, not seasonal, not 5-year renewable, perpetual like the sunrise, the kicker. The county had been depositing annual water management fees into a trust account for Theodore Mercer or heirs since the 50s, which nobody ever told me about because bureaucracy loves a good miscommunication. The current balance with interest was $847,000. I stood there with my coffee going cold, while Dora spread ledgers on the counter and grinned like she'd found a winning lottery ticket in the copier tray. That night, Brianna called an emergency board meeting with a slideshow labeled Protecting Our Investment, the Dock Crisis, and her brother-in-law in a $1,000 suit kept checking his watch like he billed emotions by the minute. Non-compliant structure threatens our property values, Brianna declared, while the projector showed pictures of collapsing piers from some apocalypse. I waited, stood up, and slid Dora's copies across the table like a dealer in the world's dullest casino. Per the 1923 agreement and historic filings, my parcel carries Water Management Authority. The HOA doesn't regulate my dock or anything on this lake that falls under those rights. The room hummed, fluorescents buzzing like angry wasps, and then Marion Grant, retired real estate attorney, quiet voice, the neighbor who bakes for funerals, cleared her throat and said, "Actually, riparian rights predate most HOA covenants and remain valid, and you could watch the lawyer's confidence melt like an ice cream on blacktop." Brianna didn't blink because people with clipboards don't flinch until a camera is on them. She called a community-wide meeting for Saturday, sent glossy flyers about protecting Millbrook from legal manipulation, tried to turn me into the boogeyman, and while she rehearsed, I went back to records with Dora. We pulled everything: maps, inspection logs, the original Civil Works contract, and learned Theodore hadn't just built a dam. He'd created an entire watershed system with overflow channels and intake points and emergency spillways across 3 townships. In the language of the agreement, my family had approval power over all construction affecting watershed flow, which is a fancy way of saying we controlled the plumbing, not just the postcard. Saturday morning, before I could even lace my boots, I heard a crack like a tree splitting, and my neighbor Jake pounded the door, yelling, "Colin, get out here." Down at the waterline, the corner of my dock, the corner where Lena and I planned a memorial bench, was in splinters, and Ron Whitcomb's boat bobbed 50 yards out with a "who me" expression painted on his face. Throttle stuck. He called hands up. Engine purring perfectly. Mechanical failure, right? And I'm the Easter Bunny. You threatened me Monday, you accidentally hit me Wednesday. Pattern recognition is literally what I did for a living. So I did what engineers do when someone pokes the sleeping dragon. I installed cameras called Tony Rivas, a marine mechanic who owes me for saving his bridge bid, once called Detective Collier from County Water Patrol, and called a water rights attorney named Patricia Voss, who has the patient smile of someone who sues cities for sport. By Friday, we were all standing at the damage with the insurance adjuster while Tony slid under Ron's helm and came back up with the throttle assembly like a magician producing a rabbit. "Fresh tool marks," he said, tapping a burr with his screwdriver. This didn't stick, it was set to stick, and Detective Collier started taking photographs the way a cop does when his report will land with a thud on a prosecutor's desk. Ron got bracelets before dinner. The neighborhood grapevine went volcanic. Brianna's Facebook manifesto pivoted from "protect our community" to "beware grief-stricken men fabricating documents," and I swear she said exploiting trauma to manipulate governance like she'd swallowed a TED Talk. Patricia sent a courtesy packet to the fancy white shoe firm that mailed me a threat letter. When their lead partner heard federal water rights and 70 years of county payments, his bravado shrank 3 sizes and he floated the phrase "nuisance settlement," which is rich because the only nuisance was the sound of his retainer sliding off a cliff. Here's the twist that really turned the tide. Dr. Lee Monroe, an environmental engineer with the quiet confidence of a person who reads rivers, ran a full watershed assessment and filed it with the county official letterhead, Big Seal, the works documenting that Theodore's system had prevented an estimated $47 million in downstream flood damage over 9 decades. The county engineer, Tom Anders, came out to inspect the dam and ran his hands along the concrete like he was greeting an old friend. "Son," he finally said, "this is better than most modern work." And later that day, the county sent me formal recognition of Hereditary Water Management Authority and asked to coordinate maintenance planning, which is government for "please don't let anything break without telling us." Brianna responded by carpet bombing agencies, EPA, Army Corps, state regulators, county health, claiming, I was manipulating public water systems for personal gain. And when investigator Sarah Delgado showed up with a kit that looked NASA issued, she took one pass, looked at my maintenance logs and sensor data, and said, "This is the cleanest private system I've seen in 20 years." When she discovered Brianna had filed a fraudulent emergency report, her smile died and her pen got very busy. Ron, not to be outdone in poor choices, brought two buddies out at midnight to create an emergency by cutting cables at the overflow weir. My cameras got them in 4K like it was a training film titled How Not to Commit Infrastructure Sabotage, and the FBI's Joint Task Force took it from there because you don't mess with flood control during spring melt and call it a prank. And then the big night. Town council chambers, standing room only TV vans, double-parked teenagers selling coffee in the lot like a pop-up concession stand. America loves a showdown. Council Chair Robert Hale opened with the weary dignity of a man who wanted to be discussing potholes. Brianna arrived late in a power suit and read a statement accusing me of orchestrating an elaborate fraud with corrupt federal agents, which plays great on YouTube if you never plan to meet a judge. County Attorney Michelle Tran stepped up with a briefcase that could stop a truck and said in a voice designed for juries that every one of my documents had been verified through federal archives, state records, county engineering files, and bank ledgers. That riparian authority remained with the Mercer Trust, that the HOA had been collecting water access fees without any legal right to do so. Inspector Delgado testified that my system exceeded standards. Dr. Monroe presented the damage prevention figures with the calm of math. You could feel the room shift from gossip to gravity. When they asked if I wanted to speak, I carried one manila folder to the podium, no slideshow, no theatrics, just the county's letter and the trust papers that had sat in drawers for 70 years. "I didn't ask for this," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I wanted a dock my wife designed on a lake she loved. I inherited responsibility, not a weapon. I'm not here to shut off anybody's water or win a feud. I'm here to keep what Theodore built working and to stop people with clipboards from using fear to control their neighbors." The applause went on long enough that Chair Hale had to bang the gavel twice. 6 months later, Brianna sold fast and quiet. Ron learned that orange jumpsuits clash with everyone. The emergency HOA election put Marion Grant in the president's chair with a platform of respect plus transparency, and you could feel the whole neighborhood exhale. We set up the Millbrook Watershed Conservation Trust, used the $847,000 plus matching grants Dr. Monroe found to bring Theodore's infrastructure up to snuff for another century, and on the exact spot where Ron shattered our corner, we built the Lena Mercer Environmental Learning Pier. Kids now pull up bluegill pose for photos, release them gentle, and learn what a spillway is before they learn what a hashtag is. We started a small scholarship for engineering students who want to work on water. Nothing flashy, 50 grand a year. But our first recipient came back as an intern and tuned the overflow sensors so well, the county asked for our model. Property values climbed not because we standardized docks into plastic sameness, but because buyers could see with their own eyes that stewardship beats theater. Jake hung out a shingle for a Clean Hands construction company and now has a 6-month wait list because apparently honesty travels by word of mouth faster than gossip on a cul-de-sac. Every morning I sit on Lena's pier with a mug that smells like hope, watch herons work the shallows and osprey hunt above the spillway, and I tell her what we built from her sketchbook, how grief turned into something useful, how a bully's tantrum accidentally funded 3 environmental interns, how the quiet folks with the right documents outlasted the loud folks with the wrong ones. Here's the part that sticks with me, and maybe it's the only thing that matters. Every time a kid leans over that railing and sees a fish flash and a sensor blink and a current tug, they're seeing the truth that property rights and public good aren't enemies when grown-ups act like grown-ups. They're seeing that leadership isn't about fines and threats. It's about taking responsibility when no one's watching. I could have closed the lake and flexed the letter of the law. Instead, we opened it wider and followed the Spirit, because power that isn't restrained by purpose just becomes another kind of flood. So what would you have done? Swing the hammer or build the bridge? Where's the line between protecting what's yours and serving the people around you when the rules are written wrong or weaponized by the wrong hands? Tell me where you stand. Drop your HOA nightmares, your "you won't believe what they tried" moments, your "we fixed it the hard way" wins. Was I right to fight the clipboard with a blueprint and to choose stewardship over scorched earth once I'd won? I want to hear it all, the messy, honest debate about right versus wrong, justice versus ego, and how communities survive the friction between the two.